John Thompson sat at his small kitchen table, sipping his morning coffee, when the letter arrived. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, thick, ornate, with strange symbols embossed in gold on the envelope. The postmark was unreadable, and the paper had a texture that felt almost alive under his fingers. Curiosity piqued, he carefully opened it. The letter inside was even more puzzling. Written in an elegant script, it informed John that a distant relative, one he'd never heard of, had recently passed away. The relative had left him an inheritance located on a distant alien world. The words seemed absurd, like something out of a bad science fiction novel, yet the details were strangely specific. A planet called Zarak, coordinates in a format John didn't recognize, and instructions on how to get there. John chuckled at the absurdity of it all. An alien inheritance? He was just an ordinary man, leading an unremarkable life in a nondescript town. His days were spent working a tedious job at a local hardware store, his nights watching reruns of old TV shows. The idea of a mysterious alien fortune was laughable. But as he sat there, turning the letter over in his hands, the curiosity gnawed at him. What if it was real? What if this was his chance to break free from the monotony? Days passed, but the letter remained in the forefront of his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to see it through. What harm could come from investigating? The worst that could happen was that it was a hoax, and he'd return to his normal life. The decision was made. He'd go, if only to satisfy his curiosity. The journey itself was a blur. John followed the instructions provided in the letter, and before he knew it, he was aboard a small, nondescript spacecraft, hurtling through the stars. The coordinates led him far from Earth, farther than he ever imagined possible. He felt a mix of fear and excitement, the reality of what he was doing sinking in only as he watched the familiar stars of Earth's sky disappear behind him. When he finally arrived, the sight that greeted him was breathtaking. The planet Zarak was a marvel, vast landscapes of iridescent forests, crystal-clear oceans that shimmered with every color of the rainbow, and cities that seemed to defy gravity, floating above the ground on currents of energy. The air was rich with the scent of alien flora, and the sky glowed with hues of purple and gold, unlike anything he'd ever seen. As John stepped off the ship, he was immediately met by a group of officials, their appearance humanoid but distinctly alien, tall, with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed faintly. They greeted him with deep bows, addressing him as Honored Thompson, their tones filled with respect and reverence. "You have come at last," one of them said, their voice melodic yet formal. "Your arrival has been awaited for many cycles. You are the rightful heir to the estate of the late High Elder Zarthal, your distant kin." John blinked, trying to process the information. "High Elder? Kin? What exactly have I inherited?" The official smiled, a gesture that was both reassuring and slightly unnerving. "The High Elder's estate is vast, encompassing great wealth, lands, and properties. But there is more. As per the customs of our people, you have also inherited the bond of union. The High Elder's chosen one, his betrothed, is now yours, according to our ancient traditions." John's mind reeled. An alien bride? This was too much. He had come expecting a strange experience, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. The wealth and land were one thing, but a marriage? It was absurd, unbelievable, yet the officials stood before him, their expressions serious, awaiting his response. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. I didn't come here to get married. This is all very overwhelming." The official nodded, as if understanding his confusion. "We understand this is new to you, Honored Thompson. The bond of union is sacred among our people, a symbol of unity and continuity. However, it is also your choice. You are free to accept or reject this part of the inheritance." John was silent for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. On one hand, he could walk away, return to Earth with the wealth and leave the strange customs behind. On the other hand, rejecting the union felt wrong, as if he would be dishonoring the memory of this distant relative who had chosen him for reasons he couldn't yet understand. Finally, he spoke. "I need time to think about this. It's a lot to take in." Of course, the official replied smoothly. You are our guest, and we wish for you to feel comfortable. Take all the time you need. John nodded, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. As the officials led him to his new residence, a sprawling estate that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural beauty of Zarak, he couldn't help but marvel at the world around him. The architecture was a blend of organic and technological, with structures that seemed to grow from the ground itself, alive and vibrant. That night, as he lay in a bed more luxurious than anything he had ever known, John's thoughts raced. He had come here expecting an adventure, but now he was faced with decisions that could change his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. The wealth was tempting, but it came with strings attached, strings that tied him to a culture and a person he didn't know. But deep down, a part of him was intrigued. This was his chance to leave behind his mundane life and step into something extraordinary. And perhaps, just maybe, he could find a place for himself in this alien world. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. As he drifted off to sleep, the alien sky visible through the large window above him, John knew that his journey had only just begun. John stood in the grand hall of the estate, feeling out of place amidst the opulence. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and anticipation as he awaited the arrival of Lyra, the woman who had been introduced to him as his bride. The term felt foreign, as did everything about this world. He had barely come to terms with the idea that he had inherited an alien estate, let alone the notion of an alien wife. Yet, here he was, standing in a room adorned with shimmering crystals and soft, glowing light, waiting to meet the person who was now tied to his future. The door at the far end of the hall opened, and John's breath caught in his throat. Lyra entered, moving with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. She was tall, slender, with skin that shimmered like moonlight, a pale silver hue that contrasted strikingly with her deep blue eyes. Her hair, long and flowing, seemed to ripple like water, cascading down her back in soft waves. She wore a flowing gown that seemed to be made of light itself, shifting and changing with every step she took. Everything about her was ethereal, elegant, and undeniably alien. And yet, she was captivating, in a way that John couldn't quite put into words. Lyra approached him, her expression calm yet curious. John felt a rush of emotions, awkwardness, fascination, and a deep sense of unease. He didn't know how to greet her, what to say. This wasn't like anything he'd ever experienced. "Hello?" he finally managed to say, his voice sounding small and unsure. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady and penetrating. "Greetings, John Thompson," she replied, her voice soft and melodic, yet carrying an undertone of strength. "It is an honor to finally meet you." John swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. I don't know what to say. This is all so strange." A small, almost imperceptible smile played on Lyra's lips. "I can imagine. It must be overwhelming for you. But know that I have awaited this moment for a long time. It was foretold that my partner would come from a distant world, and now here you are." Her words hung in the air, filled with a sense of destiny that made John's skin prickle. He had come here out of curiosity, but now he was faced with something far deeper, an expectation, a prophecy that had shaped Lyra's entire life. "You were told that someone like me would come?" he asked, trying to wrap his mind around the idea. "Yes." Lyra nodded, her expression turning more solemn. "Since my youth, I was raised with the knowledge that I would be joined with someone from beyond the stars. Our people believe in the binding of souls across worlds, a union that strengthens both our species and our spirits. I have prepared for this all my life." John felt a pang of guilt. He was just an ordinary man, stumbling into this situation by chance. He hadn't prepared for anything, hadn't even known about this world until a few days ago. And now, this woman, this extraordinary, alien woman, was looking at him as if he was the fulfillment of some grand prophecy. "I don't know if I'm what you were expecting," he admitted, feeling the weight of his own inadequacies. Lyra's gaze softened, and she took a step closer. "Expectations are shaped by the unknown," she said gently. "But reality often brings something unexpected, something new. I do not see this as a burden, John, but as a path we must walk together. Her words were reassuring, but they didn't fully alleviate the turmoil in John's mind. The idea of an arranged marriage, especially with someone so different from him, was daunting. He had come from a world where relationships were built on choice, on mutual understanding. But here, in this alien culture, there were customs and beliefs that he barely understood, and they had thrust him into a role he wasn't sure he could fulfill. Lyra seemed to sense his hesitation. This union, while significant, is not without its challenges, she continued, her tone thoughtful. I, too, have my uncertainties. I was raised to believe in duty, in the importance of this bond. But that does not mean I am without my own desires, my own hopes for what this could become. John looked at her, seeing a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. It was a reminder that she, too, was navigating unfamiliar territory. What do you hope for? He asked quietly, genuinely curious. Lyra took a moment to answer, her gaze distant as if searching for the right words. I hope, for understanding, for connection, she said finally. I hope that we can find common ground, despite our differences. That we can build something together, not just out of obligation, but out of choice. Her words resonated with John. He had expected an alien culture to be entirely foreign, but here was something familiar, an earnest desire for connection, for something real and meaningful. It wasn't so different from what he wanted, what anyone would want. I think I'd like that too, he admitted, feeling a small spark of hope. Lyra smiled again, this time more openly. Then perhaps, we are not so different after all. As they stood there, facing each other, John felt the beginnings of a tentative bond forming between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something, a shared understanding, a mutual respect. And maybe, just maybe, it could grow into something more. The challenges ahead were still daunting, and the cultural differences were vast. But for the first time since his arrival, John felt a sense of possibility, of hope that this strange new world could become something more than just a bizarre inheritance. It could become a home. As the conversation continued, they began to talk more freely, sharing stories of their respective worlds. John spoke of Earth, of its beauty and its flaws, while Lyra shared more about Zarak, its history, and the customs that governed their lives. The more they talked, the more the distance between them seemed to shrink. By the time the evening drew to a close, John felt a sense of calm he hadn't expected. The future was still uncertain, but at least he wasn't facing it alone. And as he looked at Lyra, he realized that this alien world, with all its strangeness, might just be the beginning of something extraordinary. John stood at the edge of the balcony, overlooking the vast, shimmering city of Zarak. The decision had been made. He would stay. There was too much to learn, too much to understand. He wasn't ready to walk away from the inheritance, nor from Lyra, who had become more than just a part of the deal. This world, with all its wonders and mysteries, had started to draw him in, despite the strangeness of it all. His days became a whirlwind of new experiences. The estate was beyond anything he could have imagined, a sprawling complex that blended seamlessly with the natural environment. The technology at his disposal was years, maybe centuries, ahead of anything on Earth. Automated systems catered to his every need, and yet, it all felt strangely impersonal. The luxury was undeniable, but so was the discomfort that came with it. He had always been a man of simple tastes, and the sheer opulence of his new life left him feeling out of place. Lyra, however, was a constant presence. She guided him through the complexities of Zarak's society, explaining the customs and traditions that governed their lives. Her knowledge was vast, and her patience seemingly endless, but there was always a formality to her demeanor, a distance that John couldn't quite bridge. He appreciated her efforts, but the cultural divide between them was more profound than he had anticipated. The more John learned about this alien world, the more he began to appreciate its intricacies. The technology was awe-inspiring, buildings that grew organically, vehicles that moved without visible propulsion, and a communication network that seemed almost telepathic. Yet, it was the cultural richness that intrigued him the most. Art, music, and literature were deeply revered, and every aspect of life seemed to be interwoven with a profound respect for history and tradition. As John delved deeper into the culture, he also began to see the cracks beneath the surface. There were tensions within the society, subtle yet undeniable. The political landscape was complex, with various factions vying for influence. Economic systems were equally intricate, with a focus on sustainability and resource management that was foreign to John's earthly sensibilities. These complexities were fascinating, but they also highlighted the challenges he would face in truly integrating into this world. Lyra, too, began to change. The initial formality between them started to fade as they spent more time together. She opened up about her past, her upbringing, and the expectations that had been placed on her. John learned that Lyra had always been seen as different, even among her own people. Her connection to the prophecy had set her apart, leading to both reverence and isolation. She shared her fears, of failing to live up to those expectations, of not being the partner John needed. These revelations brought them closer, but they also introduced new tensions. John's earthly values often clashed with the customs of Zarak. He struggled with the concept of predestined roles, with the idea that so much of his life was being dictated by forces beyond his control. Lyra, on the other hand, found it difficult to understand John's insistence on personal freedom and choice. These differences led to misunderstandings, to moments of frustration where neither could fully grasp the other's perspective. One evening, after a particularly heated discussion, John found himself questioning his decision to stay. The wealth, the luxury, the respect, it all came at a cost. He wasn't sure if he could adapt to this world, if he could truly be the person Lyra and her people expected him to be. The doubts gnawed at him, casting a shadow over the life he was trying to build. But then there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when everything seemed to fall into place. A shared laugh over a misunderstanding, a quiet walk through the glowing forests at night, the way Lyra looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. These moments gave him hope, made him believe that despite the challenges, there was something real between them, something worth fighting for. As John continued to navigate his new life, he also became more involved in the political and economic affairs of Zarak. He attended meetings with leaders, learned about the intricate balance of power that kept the society functioning, and started to understand the unique challenges they faced. The more he learned, the more he realized that his role here was not just symbolic. He had the potential to influence real change, to make a difference in a world that was still finding its place in the galaxy. However, this newfound responsibility also added to the pressure. The expectations placed on him were immense, and the fear of failure loomed large. Every decision he made felt like it carried the weight of an entire planet's future. Lyra was there, always offering guidance, but the burden was still his to bear. The cultural norms he struggled with were not just personal, they were woven into the very fabric of Zarak's society. As the days turned into weeks, John's unease began to grow. The life he had inherited was more than he had bargained for. The wealth, the power, the alien customs, it all felt overwhelming at times. And yet, there was no turning back. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. But there was also a strange sense of belonging beginning to take root. Despite the differences, despite the challenges, John was starting to see this world as his own. The discomfort was still there, but it was accompanied by a growing understanding, a connection to something larger than himself. He wasn't just an outsider looking in. He was becoming a part of Zarak, slowly but surely. Lyra, too, was changing. The walls between them were coming down, replaced by a bond that was no longer just about duty. They were learning from each other, growing together in ways neither had expected. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, John felt like he wasn't walking it alone. As they stood together on the balcony one evening, watching the twin moons rise over the horizon, John realized that this was home now. It wasn't what he had planned, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. John's sense of unease began to deepen as whispers reached his ears, rumors of discontent among the people of Zarak. It started with subtle glances, lingering looks that held more suspicion than curiosity. Then came the cold, formal greetings from those who once welcomed him warmly. It didn't take long for John to realize that not everyone was pleased with his arrival. There were those who viewed him as an outsider, a disruptor to the carefully balanced traditions of their society. One evening, as he and Lyra discussed the strange shift in attitudes, a messenger arrived with a warning, an anonymous note, simple yet chilling in its directness. "You don't belong here. Leave while you can." The message was clear. There were those who wanted him gone. This wasn't just idle discontent, it was a threat. John shared the note with Lyra, and her expression darkened. "There are factions within our society," she explained, her voice tense. "Not all agree with the High Elder's decision to pass his legacy to you. They see you as a threat to the old ways, an outsider who could upset the balance of power." As they delved deeper into the matter, John and Lyra began to uncover the extent of the conspiracy against them. It wasn't just about disliking John. There were those who actively plotted to discredit him, to sever the union and reclaim the wealth and influence he had inherited. This faction, deeply rooted in tradition, believed that an Earthling had no place wielding such power on Zarak. To them, John was not just an outsider, he was a usurper. Lyra stood by him with unwavering loyalty. Her initial reserve had melted away, replaced by a fierce determination to protect what they were building together. She had her own connections, allies who were loyal to the High Elder's memory and to the vision of unity he had believed in. Together, they began to strategize, to find ways to counter the growing threat. But the conspirators were cunning, striking in ways that tested John's resolve. They spread lies, whispered rumors that John was corrupt, that he sought to exploit Zarak for Earth's gain. They questioned his every decision, sowing doubt among the people. The tension grew, and John found himself increasingly isolated, struggling to maintain the respect and authority he had been granted. Yet, through it all, John felt his resolve hardening. This wasn't just about wealth or power anymore, it was about something real, something he and Lyra were building together. He refused to let these conspirators tear it apart. Lyra's bravery only strengthened his determination. She was not just his bride by custom, she was his partner, his equal in this fight. The conflict reached its climax when the conspirators launched a direct attack. Under the cover of darkness, they attempted to force John off the planet, hoping to seize control of the estate, and everything that came with it. The attack was swift and brutal, catching John and Lyra by surprise. But they had prepared for such a moment, knowing it was only a matter of time before the conspirators made their move. John's earthly knowledge, combined with Lyra's deep understanding of her world, became their greatest asset. They used the estate's advanced technology to counter the attack, outsmarting their opponents at every turn. What the conspirators hadn't counted on was John's adaptability, his ability to think on his feet in ways that defied their expectations. And they underestimated Lyra's loyalty and her strategic mind. The battle was fierce, but in the end, John and Lyra prevailed. The conspirators, exposed and defeated, were forced to retreat, their plans shattered. The immediate threat was over, but the scars of the conflict remained. John knew that this was just the beginning, that their victory had only earned them a temporary reprieve. The underlying tensions within Zarak's society were still there, simmering beneath the surface. In the aftermath, the darker side of the alien world became more apparent to John. The political corruption, the power struggles, these were not unique to Earth. Zarak, for all its beauty and advanced technology, had its own share of flaws, its own battles for control. It was a sobering realization, one that reminded John that every society, no matter how advanced, had its imperfections. But despite the challenges, there was a sense of accomplishment. John and Lyra had faced their first real test together, and emerged stronger for it. The experience had deepened their bond, turning what had started as a mere arrangement into something more profound. John no longer saw Lyra as just his alien bride, she was his partner in every sense of the word. Together, they had confronted the threat and protected their future. As they stood together in the aftermath, John knew that their journey was far from over. The conspiracy had been thwarted, but the underlying issues remained. They would need to continue navigating the complexities of Zarak's society, dealing with both the allies they had gained and the enemies they had made. But John felt ready for it. The challenges they had faced had steeled his resolve, making him more determined than ever to carve out his place in this alien world. Lyra, too, seemed more resolute. The battle had brought out a side of her that John hadn't seen before, a fierce, unyielding strength that matched his own. She had proven herself to be more than just a symbol of tradition. She was a leader, someone who could stand by his side and face whatever came next. In the end, the threat within had tested them both, revealing not only the dangers that lurked in the shadows but also the strength they had in each other. And as they looked out over the horizon, the future no longer seemed so uncertain. Together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by a bond that was no longer just a matter of tradition, but of choice. The final confrontation unfolded in the heart of Zarlek's capital, where the conspirators had gathered to make their last stand. John and Lyra, having anticipated this move, were prepared. The air was thick with tension as they entered the chamber, every eye on them, the weight of the moment pressing down on their shoulders. This was it, the culmination of everything they had faced together. The stakes were clear, their future, their relationship, and the very balance of power on Zarlek hung in the balance. The leader of the conspirators stepped forward, his expression a mix of defiance and desperation. "You don't belong here, Earthling," he spat, his voice echoing in the grand hall. "This world is not yours to claim. We will not allow you to tarnish our traditions with your presence." John met his gaze with a calm resolve. "I didn't come here to take anything," he replied, his voice steady. "But I won't let you destroy what we're building. Zarlek is changing, whether you accept it or not. The future isn't about clinging to the past, it's about moving forward together." The conspirator sneered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had underestimated John before, and now he was realizing that this Earthling was not so easily dismissed. The confrontation reached its peak as the conspirators made their move, attempting to wrest control through sheer force. But John and Lyra were ready. John's earthly ingenuity came into play, using unconventional tactics that the conspirators had never seen before. He had learned to blend his own knowledge with the advanced technology of Zarlek, creating strategies that were as unexpected as they were effective. Lyra, with her deep understanding of her world's intricacies, guided him through the complex social and political landscape, turning the tide in their favor. As the confrontation raged, it became clear that John was no longer the unsure outsider who had first arrived on Zarlek. He had grown into a respected and powerful figure, someone who could not only hold his own but also inspire those around him. His transformation was complete, from an ordinary Earthling to a leader who could bridge the gap between two worlds. Lyra, too, had evolved. The reserved, duty-bound woman he had first met was now assertive and confident, standing by his side not just as his partner, but as an equal force in their fight for the future. She had found her voice, and with it, the strength to challenge the traditions that had once bound her. The battle was fierce, but in the end, the conspirators were no match for the combined force of John and Lyra. They were defeated, their plans shattered, and their influence diminished. With their downfall, the path was clear for John and Lyra to solidify their position, not just as leaders of the estate, but as symbols of a new era for Zarlek. As the dust settled, the people of Zarlek began to see John in a new light. He was no longer just an outsider, he was one of them. The strength of his bond with Lyra, the way they had fought together, earned him the respect of those who had once doubted him. Slowly, the alien society began to accept him, recognizing that the changes he brought were not a threat, but an opportunity for growth. The integration of Earth and alien cultures began in earnest. John used the wealth and influence he had inherited to forge new alliances, bridging the gap between his home planet and his new one. There were challenges, of course, differences in technology, values, and ways of life, but there was also a shared desire to learn from each other, to grow together. The alliance between Earth and Zarlek became a symbol of what was possible when different worlds came together. Trade routes were established, knowledge exchanged, and a mutual respect grew between the two societies. What had once seemed impossible was now a reality. Two worlds, vastly different, finding common ground and building a future together. For John and Lyra, the journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had also brought them closer than either could have imagined. They had started as strangers, bound by tradition and obligation, but now they were united by something far more powerful: love, mutual respect, and a shared vision for the future. As they stood together, looking out over the horizon of Zarak, they knew that their work was far from done. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, but they would face them together, just as they had from the beginning. Their roles as leaders, as bridge builders between their worlds, were clear, and they embraced them with open hearts. The story ended on a hopeful note, with John and Lyra looking forward to the future they would build together. They had come from different worlds, different cultures, but they had found a way to unite their strengths and create something new, something stronger than either could have achieved alone. Their journey was a testament to the power of understanding, of love, and of the belief that even the most unlikely of unions could lead to something extraordinary. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side, united in purpose and in heart.